Good afternoon and welcome. I'd like to welcome President Roberts.
Good afternoon, everyone. All of our time is very valuable, and I appreciate you devoting some of your lunch time. So if you need to eat, if you need to do a little bit of work, if you need to get up in the middle, we all understand. Thank you for all coming closer so that we feel as though we're one collective conversation. So thank you for that. So I want to talk just very briefly about what our agenda is today. And so first of all, we listened. We had over 50 people respond to our survey, and you're going to see that the structure of our time together is very much reflective of the questions that were posed. There were 3 questions. Some people said, we have a new allocation model? We have an allocation model at all? Yes, we do. So we're going to talk a little bit about the current allocation model, what the new one is proposed. Again, Don will come up and talk about this as a learning year. There's already things that have changed as of this week with the President's Academy that was held up at Whatcom Community College. So it is a conversation between the state board and the presidents. So things are a little bit changing. So we're going to have more than one conversation. There's going to be many over the course of this year. So we hope that you'll continue to stay tuned. So questions about what is the current model, what's the new model look like? Questions about the impact. Is it similar to what happened in the past when we had a change in the model? And what does that mean for us? And then finally, what can we do? What can we all do as we learn more about the funding? So, as you recall in my comments during convocation, I talked about there will always be external forces that are a little bit outside of our control. And so we're just going to adjust our sails so that we are clearly moving toward our chartered destiny. And that piece of work is known as our strategic plan. And later on, we're going to do an update about that. But we really want to understand all the pieces that go through learning to operate this sailboat that the metaphor that we've been talking about, at least I've been talking about. So we're going to learn that, there's a mast, there's rudders, there's what other things? There's mast, rudders, tiller, there's all kinds of things like that. Well, there's also those same things in terms of our allocation model, and we really want to understand all of those tools so that we have the right fuel and resources to move us toward our preferred destination. And we're going to adjust our sails, and we're going to talk about the things that we have been doing to adjust our sails in that way. We're also going to spend quite a bit of time talking about the allocation model itself and the fundamentals of just what the allocation model is, and then some of what we know currently in what's being proposed and that the State Board has moved forward in that first volley of conversation. And then we're going to do an update. Halfway through, we will have an opportunity for you to, and I would suggest if you have questions there's cards on your table. You might want to start jotting down some of those questions that you have. So we'll have an opportunity for all of us to ask questions and for us to respond, and we will share with you as much as we know. So in the questionnaire, we ask people, what are you passionate about? What makes you get up every morning and bring your best self to Shoreline? And look at all the things. Any surprises? Oh, thank you. Any surprises? Isn't it great? Students. Students are the centerpiece of our work. It's what we get up every day to serve, to provide the best service and resources and teaching experiences for them so that they can finish what they start. So I'm very pleased with this because as a president, when you ask the question, you're hoping that it's going to align with our vision and mission, and it does. All that wordle talked about the things that we care about. We want to be the best at student success, and we want to be the best at engaging with our community. And all of us every day get up with those two things in the forefront of our work. So, as I mentioned, we want to know what fuels and what the wind is that will drive our sales. And so Dawn's going to come forward and talk about the actual model itself and what we know about it. And we're going to begin with the fundamentals of what the model actually is, so that we're all learning together and we're all understanding together the resources that we need to help us be the best at what we care about, student success and community engagement, and what we're passionate about, what drives us every day to do our best work. So with that, please warmly welcome Dawn Vinberg.
It's so nice to see you all today. I always joke with my friends that I'm not necessarily the best dinner party companion because I can talk for hours and hours and hours about the state funding allocation model. And it's really exciting to me. But today we're going to talk about some changes that will impact Shoreline and the other colleges across the state. So it isn't unique to our college, but the focus that we're going to have today is on Shoreline. And the first thing I want to mention is that the budget for this year is in place. You guys have approvals, you have a budget. Please spend your budget as you outlined in your plan to support students as best you can. So that's the key, one of the key takeaways for today. So we're going to start with a few fundamentals. Some of you have probably heard this before, again, because you know me. I talk about it at lunch, right? So the colleges here in the state of Washington have three main buckets of funding. We get funding from the state, our state allocation, which is generally tied to an FTE target, how many annualized students we teach throughout the year. We also have funding from tuition revenue, and we have funding from our grants and contracts revenue. Many of you know and work in other departments that fall into different funds and buckets, but most of those are the bookstore earns revenue and the bookstore spends revenue. Parking earns revenue and parking spends revenue. So today we're going to talk about those three main buckets of funding. And in that state allocation, we have a process where the state legislature gets together and agrees on a budget. And that budget helps decide how much money is going to the State Board for Community and Technical Colleges. It's a large amount of funding. They give it, and then the State Board staff themselves distributes it out to all the colleges. And that's the portion of the conversation that we're talking about changing today. So we wanted to talk about the key forces that help us do our work, because I'm a budget person, but I love people. And I always joke that the spreadsheets are all calm and aligned and beautiful, and people come with chaos and excitement and energy. And so that balances really well for me in my life, but it also balances really well for what we do at the college, right? The spreadsheets and the funding that they represent are a tool to help us do the good work that we do. And so that's kind of the focus of our message today, is that the message isn't about the money, it's about the tool and the resources that we need to do the good work at the college. So to give you guys a little bit of context, because I think it's important to know where we sit in the community here in the Shoreline area, our state allocation is about $19 million. Our tuition revenue is about $18 million. So it's kind of about half and half for our school. We also have funding at around the $4 million level annually from our grants and contracts. And so that makes up a pretty substantial budget, right around $50 million if you count the other auxiliary services that we have as well. That's no small chunk of change. You guys work for a large institution that does a lot of good in this community and for other people around the state and the world, as a matter of fact. So it's really important to kind of keep that in context when we're talking about the changes that are happening in the new allocation model. Okay. And the way we're funded now, so we have had an allocation model in place for about 20 years. And that allocation model is based on a base plus or minus. That's what the current allocation model is called at the state level. It means you start with where you were. We take away the temporary funding and the earmarks and allocations, and then we give you the new changes the legislature approves. So that's how we're funded right now, and that's been in place for about 20 years. About 4 years ago, the presidents, as a collective, decided that it was time to look at the model and figure out if it was doing the job it needed to do, which was passing out the money to the community and technical colleges in a way that allowed us to educate the most people across the state and across the world. So that information took a long time to figure out. So you kind of have to remember that we're talking about being reactive in a sailboat, but sometimes state government can look like a big ship that turns really slowly. So the context of this conversation started about 5 years ago. And now it's getting finalized and voted on and approved last summer by the state board and will be implemented next fall. So this year, all of us business folks are running a learning year. We are running our real live actuals exactly the way we would have, and we're comparing them to what it would have looked like if the new model would have been in place last fall. So we're kind of, or this past fall. So we're taking the whole year of fall 15 to summer of 16 and comparing it to what it would have looked like. Because the only work we've been able to do so far is modeling and forecasting based on all these different shifting parts. And so we want to see what it looks like. And probably there will be adjustments along the way. Cheryl met with the presidents last week. Earlier this week, I'm getting my weeks mixed up, and they've already made a slight change. So the things that we know now are what we're going to talk about, knowing that a lot of it is still up in the air. So there are some key changes in the new allocation model that the group here needs to be aware of. The first one relates, in no particular order, the first one that's on the board relates to the Student Achievement Initiative. So currently, for those of you that are kind of aware, performance-based funding is a big deal in a lot of industries, including education. So it gets a lot of airtime across politics, it gets a lot of airtime in industry magazines, and the jury is either still out or leaning towards it doesn't really educate students better. But the legislatures like it. And so one of the decisions was to increase the amount of money that will be provided to the colleges based on student success initiative metrics. Currently, it's less than 1% of that whole budget that goes to all of the community and technical colleges. So it's a small portion, and Shoreline gets a portion of that. And now it's going to be a bigger percentage to play with, and then based on how we perform will be how much we receive. The other analogy that kind of makes sense for this new allocation model is that it is a fixed pool. So there's a bucket of money, right? And how you perform is great. And some of that money is given to you based on how you perform. So think of it like a class. If you're taking a class and part of your grade is based on your attendance and you finished your homework on time and everything that's in your scope of control is some of your grade. But it might be the case that another part of your grade is based on how well you did compared to everybody else. So a little bit of this allocation model is now related to grading on the curve of sorts. So if we do well on our student achievement points and everybody else does really bad, we get a larger portion of that set-aside bucket for that piece. But if everybody else is doing well, then it's split more evenly across the colleges. So, who in this group knows what the Student Achievement Initiative points are made up of? Yell them out. Beta, surprisingly. Transition to first college English course, first college math course. Completion and bonus points for basic transition to basic skills to college. Exactly. So Beta's saying them in very institutional research terms. So let me go up a level. Are you building towards a college level skills? You get points for that. Did you first year retention? You get points for that. Second year retention, you get points for that. Did you complete college level math? You get points for that. And then, did they finish what they start and get a degree, a certificate, an apprenticeship, or a training? Doesn't necessarily mean they had one class to finish, but there are other reasons students come to our college and have other reasons, but those are what we're counting. So we will be continuing to focus on student success. As you guys saw through Convocation, a lot of our initiatives and a lot of our investments right now are on helping students finish what they start. And if we do that well, we'll perform well in comparison to the other colleges related to SAI points. Okay. So one of the things that I did want to mention before we dig right into the rest of the things is that this is a very different approach to how they're allocating the funds to the community colleges. And it's not necessarily very different than what we've done before. There are changes there and things that we know, but it is not about what happened to Shoreline in the past, that rebasing word. That is not this. This is about changes that we have some control over, and other colleges have control over too, and that we have the ability to chart our own course. And the SAI points are a really good example of that. We can make a difference, and we can move that needle and help inform our future based on how well we perform in student success. Okay, now this very obscure bullet called weighted FTEs. So this is a very knowledgeable audience, and is it less expensive or more expensive to teach a nursing class compared to an English class? Is it less expensive or more expensive to pay? So the state board is acknowledging that some of our classes are very expensive. They're an expensive program to run. They have state or industry mandated counts, so you can't add more students to the class in order to do it. And on the flip side, we have some classes that receive a very small amount of revenue, like ABE or ESL, right? They're not receiving tuition at the highest amount. So classes that fall into this matrix, and this was a lot of good work and a lot of analysis that the President's subcommittee went through to do. And, whoops, I'm touching the wrong thing. So the way the state board has aligned that issue is they're calling priority enrollments. It's the word that they're using that encompasses this group of classes that have low revenue, classes that are expensive to teach, or classes that the state economy needs. So those classes, students in those classes, will be counted toward reaching our target at 1.3 rather than just 1. So the list of courses that are on that pink sheet, which is the way they've given them to the presidents on pink paper, so it's kind of become an anomaly of sorts, will change every 3 years in alignment with the Department of Labor. So an outside entity will inform the state board as to what makes up those classes. And that's different than what we have now. Currently, you get a 1-to-1 ratio unless it's a specific earmark, or IBES still stays at a 1.75. So that's kind of external to this program. So that's a change, and we know that that's an established component of the allocation model. Okay, so then there's something new called the 3-year actual FTE count. How many of people in this room have heard we got to hit 96%? You guys heard that number before? Because the way the current model works is that if you hit 96% of your target FTE, you have no impact to your change next year. The new allocation model is instead taking your prior 3-year actuals and averaging those to create your 4th-year target. I'm pausing to see everybody shake their head. So we still have a target that informs how much our allocation will be, but it is not based on this arbitrary number that is base plus or minus. It is actually going to be based on how well you perform, which leads into the next component. And again, remember that how well we perform matters about how well everybody else performs towards their target as well. So, student coding. So part of the allocation model discussions over the past 4 years resulted in a change to the rules about how we count international students compared to how we count our domestic FTEs. Shoreline was obeying the rules. The rules were, and are this year, decide what you're going to do, say what you're going to do, and do it. And now the rules, starting next fall, will be that international student enrollment will be counted in that contract budget, kind of the way we used to code them. They're still students, they still need educated, everybody needs educated. It just has to do with the coding function, and they will not count toward our target anymore. So the 2% number, a little bit confusing, means that the presidents have currently decided that across all the community and technical colleges, 2% of your target enrollment of international students can be counted towards your target. So if our target is 5,000 FTEs, we'll just use nice round numbers, right? No matter what our international count is, we are allowed to count 2% of 5,000 towards hitting our target. So in classrooms, everybody's educated the same. It's a back-end count that the state board will do. So the international students are continuing to help us hit our target here at Shoreline, but in a much smaller percentage than they currently do. And then the last bullet on the key changes are the state board has also incorporated a small percent of funding that is distributed exactly the same across the whole state, and it's called maintenance and operations. It is given, divided by 34. It's intended to be kind of a small school differential, meaning that the Seattle district and the Spokane district and Pierce all get the same amount of money we get to help run some operations of our campuses. It's a little bit of an equalizer. It's not a huge part of the puzzle, but Shoreline, of course, performs well in that little category as well. So, all of this to say that this year, our budget is the way it is. The forecasts for next year have us looking really good because we get the small school differential. We perform pretty darn good middle of the road in SAI points, and we will hit our target. And why will we hit our target? Because there's a 4-year phase-in going on. So if you think of it as the 3 years prior, right? It's going to be, did we hit our target this current year? Yes, we will, because we're counting our international students towards our target. Did we hit our target last year? Did we hit our target last year? So our average 5,000-ish FTEs will be in place for the 3 years prior to next year's implementation. Is everybody kind of following that? And we are going to have this posted. There'll be more conversations. We'll have talking points that will come out. But this year and next year are pretty darn similar. Then you get to the next year after that, and our 3-year actuals now incorporate one of the years where we cannot count all of our international students towards our target. So our target will be based on 1/3 of a 3-year average of a lower head count, which is why all of our investments and all of our initiatives are focused on growing our enrollment to a place where we keep the same revenue level. That is our target. As a leadership group, as a college, we are targeting to operate our college at the size it is now by balancing our headcount, not headcount, but FTEs in all our student categories. So the model is designed to be responsive and dynamic. It is targeted to help people react to what's going on in the economic marketplace and in the educational marketplace. Whether that's going to happen or not will be seen throughout this learning year and then the implementation of the first year. But that was part of the intention. And we actually have a say in how responsive and dynamic we are to that model. And then the last bullet really is, there's so much we don't know. All of the forecasting that's been done has only been done on what the first year will look like, because there's so many movers and shakers in all of those equations, it's really hard to even estimate what the second year will look like. So bear with us as we continue to talk about this at both the state level and here as a college to make sure that we've got it. There's going to be plenty of time to ask questions. You don't have to think of them now. We'll have some time during this session. My door is always open. Again, I can talk about this stuff for a really long time. So feel free to ask me any questions that you have or send them through follow-up options. Thank you. Back to Cheryl.
I see some of our math faculty. I hope you like the fact that we're going to be talking a lot about numbers and percentages. How many figured out that the 2% would be about 100? Yay, yay, yay. So I want to talk a little bit about how we're going to adjust our sales, and we will get into a little bit more about the movement of our international students into where they were originally, which was in contract, and how that's going to help us with revenue balancing out. But I just want to let you know that we do have time to navigate these changes. And right now, we are in a good place because we're focusing on the right things. We're going to be looking at, as we move towards spring, what our enrollment target growth will need to look like. And we have a plan of moderate growth over the next 4 years that we believe is manageable, and in our updates, Bob will have a chance to talk about that. So we're all doing the right things. We're doing it in an intentional, prioritized, disciplined way, and we're focusing on building the infrastructure that will support and challenge our students so that they can, as I say, complete what they started. And so when we talk about completing what they start, we're talking about from inquiry to enrollment. We want them to complete that piece. We want them to complete an academic plan. We want them to complete their first term. We want them to complete their first year. We want them to move into courses that are college level, that transition from developmental into college level. So there's lots of points where we want to help them to achieve and to see themselves and imagine themselves moving into and experiencing the educational goal and aim they have for themselves. And so there's going to be small movement and large movement, and each one of you, as I look out, have a role in that. We've got a lot of initiatives, and we're going to give you an update on where they are. Very exciting work. We're really, as I say, putting together the architecture to do this work, and all of you have a hand in that because we want to help our students, as I say, complete what they start. And that's what fuels our passion every day, is around students and their learning, and each of us have a role in that.
First question on our list was, without international students counting as FTEs, it sounds like we're going to have more students in an already small space. What are we going to do with more headcount? Where do they go?
Of course, that's a good question. I'm going to ask Bob to answer part of this. We do have some headroom in our classes Not in all of our classes, and some they're quite full, and are most likely in our STEM area. But we do have that. We have 2 new classrooms that we've opened up. And Bob, do you want to answer the rest of that question?
You know what, Jim? I have to be really honest. I was chatting over here.
Oh.
Are you paying attention to the back of the classroom over there?
I had my...
Without international, it sounds like we're going to have more students in an already small space. Where are we going to put them? Without international counting as FTE.
So what we really face with is a section problem as opposed to an enrollment problem. We have headroom in classes that are not all the way full. Now, when you look at particular times, we are at that 80 to 90% of capacity, but there's other places where we're we're not at capacity in the classes. We also do have, again, the room for actually 6 new sections that we didn't have previously. Keep in mind that we also were able to pull off more. We have about 5,500 FTE about 10 years ago. So we do have the capacity to be able to pull that off.
Okay, next table.
Bob in the back there. Yay.
Hi. It sounded as though with the loss of the international students count, we will have to make up with the FTEs and domestic students. So how many more domestic students are we going to need to make up for the loss that it sounds like we're basically set up for with this funding model over the next 4 years?
Yeah, that's a very good question. We're going to be looking at targeted growth in enrollment. So in our international students, we are looking at diversifying. We're going to be growing a little bit there, but mostly we're going to be looking at domestic students. And in Bob's report on new initiatives, he's going to talk about how we're going to do that in ways that we can count. So I'll just give one example. How many of you went to the Claris presentation where they talked about our inquiries to enrolled students? We convert about 38% of our students. Most colleges that are doing it well convert about 60%. So we've got a lot of headroom. We've got about 4,200 or so students who want to come to Shoreline, and we're only converting 38% of them. They actually have filled out an application. They've shown a lot of interest. So we're really going to be working that. And also around retention. As Don said, we do sort of average, and I know that we want to be the best in the world at this, so we've got some room to do some things to help our students be retained and to stay. And so we're going to be working on that, and those are some of the initiatives Bob's going to be talking about. So we feel with some of the partnerships that we're developing, converting more of our interested students into applicants and keeping them, through that momentum, completing every quarter, moving forward, and all the things that you're doing to support both to create a challenging environment in the classroom and high impact learning experiences for them, great high quality services that we can do it. And we have to grow. Remember, we have a 4-year span of time to do it. So once we get all these other levers all understood at the state and through the conversation with the state board and the presidents, then we'll know exactly every year how many students we need to grow. And we will most likely have that by spring term. But we know we will need to grow a certain amount every year for the next year to balance out the difference between the international students moving to contract, and we get to keep, and I'll let Dawn, I'll have Dawn speak because she's the technician, so on that.
So again, it takes different ways of looking at students. So I don't like to always have, every time I speak in front of you, that I'm talking about students as numbers that bring in revenue. So remember that I'm dedicated to student success as well, but we can't have the conversation about how many domestic FTEs we need without understanding the balance between the two revenue buckets. So currently we count all of our students in the state FTE, and the process involved in that is that some of the tuition that they pay goes to the state. to fund things like the building fund and the innovation fund for CTC Link and other things. When we move those international students over to contract, we won't be sending that large amount to the state. Exactly what, if any, we will be sending is still being negotiated at the presidential level. But we will get to keep more of that. And so that's when we were talking about that whole revenue neutral. So it's not an exact replace every single international student we're currently counting as FTE with that exact same number of domestic FTE. It's a forecast and a balance and a mathematical equation to come up to a revenue neutral position that will allow us to operate our college and do the good work that we do. Thanks.
Can I just add a little bit to that?
Sure, Bob.
Yeah, of course. That piece there that Dawn is talking about goes back to what are the dynamic changes in the funding model. So to say that we have to have X more FTE ignores the fact that SAI really is going to matter. And we have the weighted FTEs that really is going to matter. So to come up with an FTE number becomes, it's not an accurate way to try to think about it. The accurate way is to try to think about this funding is a dynamic model aimed at student success. And the more that we aim at that student success, whether it's SAI, whether it's enrollment, all that becomes really important.
Please.
So our first question kind of tags on to that. We kind of wanted to know more about the pie chart that is the allocation. So what proportion of it, at least currently, is SAI points versus
Sure.
FTEs, et cetera?
If only I knew. So currently, the proportion of state funding that is tied to FTE count is pretty darn the whole bucket, right? Because the SAI portion that we currently get is less than $1 million. So in the future, when that percentage goes up, it'll be bigger. And again, it's a curve, so it depends on what everybody is. So even if you simply take that it's 1% of our budget now, it's going to be 5% of our budget, which is a bigger portion of 19 million than we're currently receiving for SAI. The Maintenance and Operations Fund is a small number right now. The forecast is $300,000 across all the schools. So that's, again, a small portion of our overall budget. So pie chart would be great, right? So you'd see these little tiny slices in there, little tiny for maintenance and operations. But it's money that we don't currently get. Currently, our maintenance and operations is funded based on our square footage of the institution, as it is for all colleges. This is a new approach to kind of equalizing out the cost of operations across all the schools. And then the portion that will go into the weighted FTEs actually informs the pie chart about how much money you get. So if your target FTEs are 5,000, but you're offering all your classes as those priority enrollments and they count as weighted, then you get to count your head count as 1.3. So you get a third more head count that helps you hit your target, which is a greater piece of the pie. So the pie related to head count, and I'll just say it as head count, FTEs, is a much bigger portion of the pie than the other components are, but some of the components inform how well we do in the piece of pie related to FTEs. Can I make this any more complicated?
So just to even make it a little more complicated, the state board, and they sent a letter to all the presidents. They're still wanting to weigh in on the percentage of SAI. So right now, in the original recommendation we sent to them in June, we said 5%. They're looking at it could be higher than 5%. So that's why we would need to have multiple conversations, and we want to have multiple conversations with you and keep you apprised of what this means. This truly is a learning year. It's a year where we can model all of this. So we wanted to get it out to you as soon as possible. Barb.
Okay.
Can you stand, Barb,
Okay.
so we can... Thank you.
Is this on? Okay. So following on that, kind of what we want to know is kind of what's on that pink sheet. What are the classes that are going to get the higher FTEs? And
That's nice.
because we know we're going to be starting scheduling for next year in January.
Sure.
So we kind of want to know what that is so we can help with our planning.
So the pink sheet has a lot of, if you can imagine, STEM courses on it. So science, technology, engineering, and math. I'm trying to think. All the ABE. Nursing, high demand courses, aerospace, advanced manufacturing. Those are the ones that kind of come to mind. And we have many of those. And we offer a lot of them. And that's what and many of those classes that's what we're known for, known as. So that's going to also help us with the revenue that comes to us to do the good work that we do for our students. I said aerospace, yeah, aerospace, yeah, aerospace. Other questions? One more? Or? Okay. Oh, yes, Tiffany.
Okay, so my question, or our question is, can international student success and retention help with SAI funding?
Ah, that's a good question. We're not sure right yet. I know, I feel like I'm equivocating on everything. For the 3 years, for sure. And then moving forward, that's one of the questions that's before the State Board and the presidents. So, yes, Amy.
Hi.
Hi.
Our table wanted to know, kind of based on the course question, was there's a lot of office chatter going around campus, and folks are worried about jobs,
Sure.
layoffs, program closings, that kind of thing. So just more assurance on that end would be good.
If we keep doing the work we're doing, focusing on students, creating a place where, students stay when they're learning and when they feel like they belong. And we have a caring heart and a lot of passion here. So if we keep doing the things we're doing and supporting our students, we feel as though we can move forward and we can meet this challenge. Luckily, we have 4 years to respond to it, unlike in the past. So that's the good news. And so, again, this year, there's not an impact. Next year, there will be, at this point, a slight growth for us. So we actually have 2 full years, this year and next year, to live into what we understand the model to be. That's really positive. If we're not intentional, if we're not relentlessly pursuing all of the infrastructure that we need to support our students, then it's a very dynamic and a very responsive model. And we will begin to see the impact and the feeling that impact of that model. So here are some ways to make a difference, and this is what will help us keep moving forward. Again, adjusting our sails to keep moving toward the goals that we have and the direction we want this college to go. Our students need us to go, and our community. One is to be knowledgeable. Be knowledgeable about services and programs at our college. So how many of you know about SEA? Okay, Shoreline Early Alert. Read DAG. Read your emails, go to programs, come to things like this. We'll be also sharing information through our admin team to all the managers so they can share what's going on, so that we're really, really literate about the work that's going on at the college so that we can help our students. Show our pride. So there's going to be lots of chatter. We're coming up to Thanksgiving, lots of opportunities to share a meal. Talk positively about Shoreline. Talk about all the great things that are happening here. We often hear that people come to Shoreline because they got a referral. They heard about it. So whenever you're out, talk about the great things that are happening, the great people, the great programs, and all the wonderful positive things that are happening here. Be engaged. We have had unprecedented engagement and involvement over the last year and a half. Continue that. That's going to be the new normal for the college. We all need your voice, your input, your involvement to be able to meet the new allocation model so that we can be in charge of our future. Listen to connect. Listen to each other. Listen to our students. so that we're really making sure that we're meeting their needs. So when they're asking you, I'm interested in applying to the college. Well, what program are you interested in getting into? Are you, where are you in that process? How can I help you? If you're walking along, which we all do, we're going to deliver something or going to our classes and students really need a little bit of help, it'd be great if we could walk them over and talk to them about what their goals are here and how we can help them. I'm always telling students, if you see someone with their name tag, they're here for you. The next is keep learning together. We know that colleges that learn together, grow together, and make changes together. And so the things that you're doing today, the things that you're learning with professional learning that's going on for faculty and staff, we are perfectly poised to meet this challenge. And I am very confident that we can do it. And we've got time on our side if we use it wisely. And as Bob says, we're intentional and we prioritize doing first things first in support of our students. So what I'd like to do with the little bit of time left, and I know we're going to probably go over from 1:30, but if you need to leave, please, we understand that you must do that. But I want to tell you some of the things that we are doing. I think it will inspire us and it will show that we are moving in the right direction. And you've got a leadership team, you've got administrators, faculty leadership, supervisors all across the college who are focused on this work to help you every day decide in a priority way what you're going to be doing to help us all. So I'm going to start with Bob. He's going to talk about student success, and I'm going to talk about the top 3, not all of them, the top 3.
Do you notice that was a subtle way to tell me to not talk too long? Maybe it wasn't so subtle. So one of the things that I want to talk about in terms of student success is all of the work we have been doing already to figure out what it is we can tell students, that we promise students, and what kind of a school we are. I know we offer outstanding education. How do we brand that? How do we get that out to the students? This is some of the work that we're doing with iFactory around our website that's going through a redesign now. It's the recruiting efforts that are going on now, and it is the Claris work. You remember the Claris and came to that workshop where we actually thought we got both good and bad news. Bad news that we weren't as performing as well as we could. Good news is that there was headroom for us to continue to grow. We're going to work really hard on student recruitment. Jim, Chris, Kim, Jennifer, Samira are all working very hard to get a much more intentional, purposeful outreach to the community. This is going on in all sorts of areas, not just in that area. So, for instance, Guy and I just had a conversation about some of the outreach in the science areas. I also want to say that we're working really hard in enhancing the educational experience of our students, particularly aimed at our domestic students. Those students now we're seeing, we've already invested almost $1.7 million in rebuilding our student service model. We had our very successful orientation this summer that we're going to probably move more intentionally towards mandatory. We're doing more advising. And those of you who saw Nikki's email out today, we're going to have November 9th, an advising day. November 10th, an advising day. Tell your students about this. We're going to have an Experience Shoreline Day, the 12th and the 19th. We're going to have registration, and it's you faculty that have to, and the staff have to tell the students, remind them, it's time to see an advisor, time to get into that registration. So we're doing a lot of work around that, and we're also engaged in a lot of professional learning opportunities for that. So was that 3?
Okay, so we're going to go kind of in rapid fire here. I'm going to talk a little bit about what's happening in terms of our community engagement. We had a lot of community people here on Thursday at our annual Student Success Breakfast. Really great response, lots of faculty and staff as well. We think it's going to be a little over $40,000 this year going into scholarships for our students, an emergency fund. Yay! The most important thing is we have people on our campus. We also are having the Rotary on our campus, so in the mornings for this month, and that's another really influential and important group that has supported and continues to support our college. On December 7th, we're going to have a community neighbor advisory conversation. The only way that the community has ever had a chance to interact with us is at board meetings during open comment, which is a one-way communication. We're going to change that because we know that there's going to be a lot of change potentially that's going to happen. Later on, you're going to hear a little bit about a feasibility with our housing. If the supplemental budget goes through, we'll have hopefully our new health sciences advanced manufacturing complex building. So there's a lot of positive things over the next 5 years that could be happening, and we want to get our neighbors on our side. We want to be solution oriented, so we're going to start building that relationship on December 7th. And then how many of you try to leave college between 11 or 10:30 to 12:30 ever? Really congested, really hard. Okay, so we're going to have a meeting with the city of Shoreline to talk about ways to look at congestion and traffic at that 5-way stop. This is really, I'm super excited about this because they're really coming in tour de force with some solutions that we can hopefully put into action. And then finally, we have had the city approve our banners and also the light, and we hope in the next few weeks we'll have banners from 155th to 160th, 165th to 160th, and the dual name of 160th to College Way. Yay! So we will finally have a presence on Aurora. So those are the things that we're doing, and again, Thanksgiving, talk positively, as you always do, about the college. Wherever you go, in the grocery store, at the cleaners, all those folks are going to be hearing more about the cool things that are happening here.
How many of you remember the name Dr. Bob Hughes from last year? Okay, so good. The name's getting out there. Over the last summer, Dr. Hughes, a consultant who's working with the college, recommended that we modify the schedule of our work together to make sure that the other important tasks of the college, like our strategic planning process, are completed without distraction. So Bob is working with me this year instead on a different schedule that was approved by the president to focus on direct consultation to help us make changes in our established recruitment processes and our outreach processes that are aimed toward increasing the diversity of our workforce. So this work is going to help us prepare for sustaining those efforts and make sure that we're working towards seeking and hiring the best qualified people to work here at the college over future years. And it's long-term work. So Dr. Hughes will be again working closely with HR this year and coming back for more campus-wide work in the next year. Secondly, we're starting what's called a Supervisors Academy, so we're going to start providing formal training for people with supervisory responsibilities, starting with admin exempts, and we'll start that in January with a consultant hired to work with the college on providing a structured approach to supervisory training that should help bring some consistency in terms of our management practices. Next, we're in the process of preparing to roll out our new campus community standard, and again, we hope you've paid attention to the different iterations of that as it's been developed and come before College Council. But the community standard is an important value statement for the college that also connects with our Title IX campaign. And again, focusing on an environment that is safe and respectful for all will hopefully help to attract both the best of employees and the best of students to be here. So we're hoping you'll all join with us in that spirit of focusing on respectful treatment for everyone and ensuring everyone understands those expectations coming out of the community standard. And finally, maybe a sad note, maybe a positive note as we move forward, but we know that Bob Francis here will be retiring at the end of this academic year, so we're starting the recruitment for his position in the executive vice president mode. So shortly you'll start hearing about that. You'll see call-outs for committee members and such, And we hope, again, in the spirit of positive talk, that we're all spreading the word that this is a college that is looking for the best possible executive vice president over the areas of academics and student affairs as we go forward. Thank you.
And now I get to talk about something fun. So there's some exciting capital construction projects going on this year. And for those of you that understand a little bit about how the complicated state budget works, we have been funded for some fixes on our campus this year, roofs and HVACs and all of those kind of components. So that state allocation has arrived. And we are also using a state allocation that was previously awarded to the college for the second phase of the gym. You guys probably heard that we had hoped to put a wellness center there, and that money is repurposed for the 4,000 building. So we were doing some workshops last week that went really well, and some planning to remodel the 4,000 building based on stakeholder input. We also have in the hopper the design work associated with the Health and Sciences Advanced Manufacturing Classroom Complex. I think I can roll that off my tongue now. So the first brand new building on Shoreline campus in 25 years. Woo! So the state board is putting us forward for the supplemental budget, which means that when the legislative session comes back in January, they may be considering how far down we might go on the list, and we're on the list. So we're being considered for the supplemental budget, which means some programming workshops and other stuff is happening now for the pre-design work. And then if we're funded in the supplemental work, we can move into design documents when we get our funding July 1st of 2016 instead of 2017. So 2017 would be the next biennium, and so that one we're pretty sure we're on that list. But work will begin, and it will coincide. And then this building. So we are, how many times have you heard a student comes into this building first? The first time on campus, and where do they walk for questions? Right here. And so we're going to add sometime for opening in winter quarter the information welcome desk right there as students walk in. So it will be a place where questions can be answered and students can be directed to help, plus a refresh of the student furniture and carpeting or some other kind of flooring perhaps in the area across the way. So there's going to be some refresh in the pub. And then, as we mentioned, a convocation, there is, of course, a 5-year plan for refreshing. So we're updating the nursing building. We're doing a few other things to kind of give the campus a better look. So those are the things that are underway, along with student housing.
So last week at Wednesday's board meeting, the board approved funding for a feasibility study for on-campus housing. Now, if you've been paying attention to the grapevine and to Day at a Glance for the past several years, you know that we've taken several looks at on-campus and off-campus student housing. And to be honest, we've mostly been in a reactive mode. Developers would come to us. We looked at master leasing an apartment building. We looked at developing on the campus. We had a group of investors who we looked at doing a 99-year ground lease of the soccer field for. So we've taken a number of looks at this, but we've not really done it in a proactive planning way. So that's the phase that we begin now. And I encourage you to pick up a copy of the Ebb Tide that came out today. On page 2 there's a story, and I've read it, and it does do a really good summary of where we're at. So we're going to be looking at this feasibility study probably beginning within the next 3 weeks, certainly by the 1st of December, with the target finish date of March 1st. Actually, we'll finish the feasibility study sometime in mid-February, and the idea is to go to the legislature to issue bonds, or what we call a certificate of participation, if the feasibility study indicates that the revenues from student housing would be sufficient to cover the costs. And we would be doing that sometime in the legislative session that begins in January, and would probably go to the bond market in the summer and get the funding then, and then begin the design and construction process. And of course, all of this is contingent on the housing project actually being feasible as indicated in the study. They'll look at things at market rents, costs of construction, all of the things that you would expect costs of operation. Now, shifting to the strategic plan, we had really unprecedented participation in our strategic planning process on opening day. We had hundreds of people participate in the work that we did in the gym right before lunch, and prior to that we had many, well over, I think, 300 people prior to that had participating in the SWOT analysis and in opportunities to comment. So since opening day, we've been looking at all of the comments and really listening and filtering through these comments and figuring out how to take all of that good work and reflect it in the next draft of the strategic plan. So as of now, we have begun that work with the Strategic Plan Task Force, which met on Wednesday. So what's going to happen between now and the end of the year is that will go back and forth between the Strategic Plan Task Force and the Executive Leadership Team. So it'll be sort of a structured dialogue. And then when we come back in winter quarter, we'll roll out one more time to the campus what that plan is looking like, have a final check-in, and it'll go to the board for presentation sometime in winter quarter. Along the way, if you read your email that came out at 5 o'clock this past Monday morning, you'll see that we're going to be checking in on our vision and mission statements. Now, the vision and mission of the college are set by the board, and we did not take, quite intentionally did not take time, because it would have taken a lot of time, to completely redo the mission and vision of the college. But we do want to make sure that the draft goals that we have as of now are in reasonable alignment with the vision and mission and vice versa. So we're going to have a quick opportunity to comment and on the vision and mission of the college and how they align with the draft strategic goals. And I like to say this is not a conversation about concepts or paragraphs or even sentences. It's really a conversation about individual words within the vision and mission. That's the level that we're looking at. And so I happen to have right here the email. 2 sessions, one next week and one the following. Next week will be Thursday the 12th of November at 3 in the afternoon, and the following week will be Tuesday the 17th of November at 8:30 in the morning. So we did one for one afternoon and one morning. And those will be 90 minutes each, and they'll be facilitated by Laura Rehrman. And there will also be an opportunity to comment online later this month.
All right. So I hope you see that I feel there's a lot of energy and oops, did I go the wrong direction? Thank you. Yes, around campus about all the great initiatives that we're working on, the good work we're focusing on students, and it's really great. I had Stephen count, we have over 100 people here today, plus those who will check into the presentation afterwards. This is a college that has a great heart and a great care, and the fact that you're here shows it. As I said, there is no challenge that we can't problem solve together, that we can't figure out how to come to a solution together. And I am very encouraged by it. I hope you see that this is not a message of, oh my gosh, it's a message of we know what drives us. We know the how, we know the why of our work. It's students and being responsive to our community. And now we're talking really about the what. How do we make that why into the what? And so I'm very confident we have the right people at the right time to do this work for the legacy of the next 50 years of the college. So I know you're all here because you're all in, and I really appreciate all the involvement that you've had because, as I said, this is the new set point for the college. We need you. We need your good thinking. We need, when we send out a survey, please share it. I hope you see some of the comments were reflected in having a chance for us to talk in the middle. And we want to continue to be responsive to you and be the kind of leadership team that listens and cares. So with that, fins up, and we're all in.
All in.
All in. Thank you very much. Please, if you could turn in the questions that you have, we're going to put out 2 pieces, we promise you. One is answers to the questions that maybe we didn't get to, And 2, we're going to have a summary of all the things we talked about so that you're conversant about where this new model is. So again, thank you very much.